I spent 5 days in Malta, and honestly, it wasn't what I expected. Some places were absolutely incredible, others were seriously overcrowded, and the prices might surprise you. In this video, I'll show you a complete Malta itinerary, the real travel costs, and exactly what's worth it and what's not. I started my Malta trip by flying into Malta International Airport, and honestly, it's one of the easiest airports in Europe to navigate. I was out with my luggage in under 20 minutes right at the airport. I rented a compact car from Sixt for 42 euros per day. And if you are planning a Malta itinerary, I highly recommend renting a car because it gives you total freedom to explore the island. Just keep in mind, driving is on the left side like in the UK. From the airport, it was about a 20-minute drive to St Julian's, one of the best areas to stay in Malta, especially for first-time visitors. I checked into the Hyatt Regency Malta, where I paid 250 euros per night for a double room for 2 people including breakfast. Since the official check-in time was 3 p.m, I left my car at the hotel's free parking and went out to explore the area on foot. The first place I walked to was Pinola Bay, and this is where Malta really started to feel real to me. Colorful fishing boats, restaurants right by the water, and a lively Mediterranean atmosphere. From there, I followed the coastal promenade all the way to Baluta Bay, which feels quieter and more local, with a more relaxed vibe. Along the way, I stopped at La Crema, where I had a really good coffee and a fresh croissant for about 5 euros, and honestly, it was one of those simple moments that makes a trip feel special. After that, I went back to the hotel and checked into my room, where I got a really nice surprise. The hotel sent a bottle of Prosecco and a chocolate plate for my birthday, which made my first day in Malta even more memorable. In the evening, I went out again to explore St Julian's, which has a very lively and modern vibe compared to the rest of Malta. For dinner, I chose Caviar and Bull, one of the most popular restaurants in the area, where my dinner cost 58 euros including drinks. After dinner, I grabbed a cocktail at the hotel's rooftop bar for 14 euros, enjoyed the views over the city, and then headed back to my room to rest because the next day I was starting my full Malta travel itinerary. I started my second day in Malta with breakfast at the hotel, then headed straight to Valletta, the capital and one of the absolute must-visit places in any Malta itinerary. I parked at the MCP car park right at the city entrance, which cost me 6 euros for a few hours and is by far the most convenient option. As soon as I walked in, the first thing that caught my attention was the Triton Fountain, followed by the impressive city gate and the massive stone bastions that instantly give you that historic Malta feeling. From there, I walked along Republic Street, the main street of Valletta, lined with shops, cafes, and beautiful historic buildings, and stopped for a quick coffee at Starbucks for 4 euros 50 cents. As I explored deeper, I passed by smaller churches like St. Barbara and St. Francis of Assisi, then wandered into the narrow side streets, which honestly felt like a maze full of hidden corners and perfect photo spots. But the real moment was when I reached St. John's Square. The atmosphere completely changes here, with outdoor restaurants, live energy, and one of the most iconic landmarks in Malta, St. John's Co-Cathedral. The entrance costs 15 euros, and it's absolutely worth it for its incredible interior. Along the way, I also passed landmarks like the Courts of Justice and the Great Siege Monument. And what I really liked about Valletta is that it's not just about ticking off landmarks, it's about the overall experience. Colorful Maltese balconies, small street markets, and local souvenir shops where I picked up a few items for around 10 euros, 15 euros. I spent around 3 to 4 hours exploring Valletta, and by the end of it, it felt like the perfect mix of history, culture, and everyday life. Easily one of the highlights of any Malta travel itinerary. I continued exploring Valletta by heading to Republic Square, one of the liveliest spots in the city, filled with cafes and restaurants, and a great place to take a short break, then walk past the National Library and the Queen Victoria statue before making my way to St George's Square, where you'll find the Grandmaster's Palace, one of the most important historical buildings in Malta. As I kept walking through the narrow streets, I started to notice the traditional Maltese balconies, known as galleria, which really give Valletta its unique character. From there, I headed down to the Lower Barrakka Gardens, which is completely free to enter and offers incredible views over the Grand Harbor and the three cities. Easily one of the best viewpoints in Valletta. Just a short walk away, I visited the Siege Bell War Memorial, then continued towards the Upper Barrakka Gardens, passing through historic streets and Victoria Gate along the way. Before going up to the main terrace, I paid €3 to visit the saluting battery from below, where you can see the cannons up close, but the real highlight is actually from above. So right after that, I went up to the Upper Barrakka Gardens, which is completely free to enter, and from here you can watch the traditional cannon firing with a perfect panoramic view. The cannons are usually fired at 12 PM and 4 PM, so it's definitely worth timing your visit around that. The view from here is easily one of the most iconic in all of Malta, especially with the cruise ships in the harbor. After that, I continued exploring nearby landmarks like Auberge de Castile and Spaziu Creativ, along with smaller but beautiful spots like Knistia Tal Vitorja, the Paul Boffa Monument, and the Church of St Catherine of Italy. And overall, this part of Valletta felt like the perfect mix of history, architecture, and viewpoints, and one of the absolute highlights of any Malta itinerary. After Valletta, I drove about 20 minutes to Marsaxlokk, a traditional fishing village and easily one of the most authentic places you can visit in Malta. I found free parking right by the harbor, which made everything super easy, and within seconds you're surrounded by the famous colorful fishing boats called luzzus, one of the most iconic views in Malta. The whole area is filled with small market stalls selling souvenirs and local products, and it feels much more local and relaxed compared to Valletta. If you want to do something unique here, you can take a small boat tour to St. Peter's Pool, with prices starting from just €5 per person for around 30 to 60 minutes, which is honestly great value. For lunch, I stopped at Il Bouquet restaurant, ordered seafood and octopus, and paid €55 for 2 people including drinks, which is very reasonable for a seaside restaurant. After lunch, I walked around the harbor, grabbed a quick coffee for around €3 and just enjoyed the atmosphere. This is definitely one of those places where you slow down and take it all in. Then I drove about 15 minutes to Via di Shuri to visit the famous Blue Grotto, one of the most popular natural attractions in Malta. I paid €10 for a 15-minute boat ride into the caves, and the moment you enter, the water turns into this unreal glowing blue color, easily one of the most visually striking experiences on the island. It's a short tour, but definitely worth it, especially if the weather is good and the sea is calm, and I highly recommend coming early in the morning for the best light and fewer crowds. After that, I headed back to the hotel to rest, before going out again in the evening. In the evening, I headed back to Valletta, and the atmosphere felt completely different compared to daytime. The streets were beautifully lit, with a much more relaxed and romantic vibe. I started by walking around the Royal Opera House ruins, which look even more impressive at night, then made my way to St John's Square, where the illuminated cathedral becomes the main focal point of the city. The narrow streets, filled with warm lights, small bars, and outdoor tables, create a unique evening experience that feels both lively and intimate at the same time. For dinner, I went to AKI, a modern Asian restaurant in Valletta, where I had sushi and cocktails, and the total came to around €65 per person, which is on the higher end, but definitely worth it for the quality and experience. After dinner, I spent some time just walking through the streets, passing by busy bars and enjoying the nightlife. And honestly, this was one of the biggest surprises of my trip. Valletta at night has a completely different energy that you really shouldn't miss. Even if you don't plan to spend money, just walking around here at night is completely free and absolutely worth it. After that, I headed back to the hotel to rest and get ready for the next day of my Malta itinerary. On my third day in Malta, I headed to Mdina, the ancient walled city known as the Silent City, and the moment I crossed the main gate, everything changed. It felt like stepping into a completely different century. Unlike Valletta, Mdina is quiet, calm, and almost surreal, with narrow stone streets, almost no traffic, and a very peaceful atmosphere. Right near the entrance, I passed by the Mdina dungeons, where the ticket costs around 5 euros if you want to explore the darker side of the city's history. Then continued walking through the streets, stopping by small souvenir shops and places like Mdina Glass, where you can find beautiful, handcrafted items. As I explored deeper, I visited St Paul's Cathedral, one of the most impressive landmarks in Mdina, where the entrance fee is around 10 euros and the interior is incredibly detailed and definitely worth seeing. One of the best things to do here is simply walk without a plan. The city is small, but every corner feels like a photo spot, with traditional Maltese balconies, old wooden doors, and perfectly preserved architecture. You'll also see horse carriage tours around the city, which usually cost around 35 euros, 40 euros per ride. But personally, I don't support these kinds of activities because I believe animals are often used in ways that aren't fair to them, so it's something I prefer to avoid. I spent some time sitting at a small cafe, had a coffee for about 3 euros and 50 cents, and just enjoyed the silence, which is honestly the best part of Mdina. Overall, I spent around 2 to 3 hours here, and it felt completely different from anywhere else in Malta. Much quieter, more atmospheric, and easily one of the most unique stops in any Malta itinerary, and if you really want to experience it at its best, I highly recommend coming early in the morning or later in the afternoon to avoid the crowds and truly feel that silent city atmosphere. After Mdina, I drove to Popeye Village, one of the most unique and touristy attractions in Malta, and before even going inside, I stopped at the viewpoint above, which is completely free and honestly gives you one of the best views of the entire village. And personally, I think for most people, this viewpoint alone is already enough. If you are using a drone, just keep in mind that Malta has strict drone rules, so you need to stay below 120 meters and avoid restricted areas. To enter Popeye Village, I paid 24 euros per person. And once inside, it really does feel like stepping into a movie set, because it was originally built for the 1980 Popeye film starring Robin Williams. The colorful wooden buildings, small streets, and seaside location make it very photogenic, and you'll find themed houses, small museums, cafes, and even live performances by actors dressed as Popeye characters throughout the day. There's also a small beach area with sunbeds and water activities, so you can easily spend several hours here. But here's the honest part. If you're just coming for photos and a quick visit, 24 euros can feel quite expensive for what you get. But if you stay longer, swim, and actually use the facilities, then it can be worth it. After that, I drove to Melia Bay, one of the few sandy beaches in Malta, where you can swim or relax at beach clubs, and then continued through St Paul's Bay, which is a nice coastal area to drive through before heading back to the hotel. After the road trip, I continued the day in Sliema, one of the most modern and lively areas in Malta, especially known for shopping, restaurants, and coastal walks. I parked my car in a central parking garage, which cost around 2 euros, 3 euros per hour, and started walking along Tower Road, a long seaside promenade with great views of Valletta across the water. This is easily one of the best places in Malta for a relaxed walk with plenty of cafes, international restaurants, and spots to just sit and enjoy the view. And you can also take a ferry from here to Valletta for around 2 euros, which is a really easy and budget-friendly way to get between the two areas. As I walked, I passed St Anne Square, the Sliema ferry terminal, and several boat tour stands. And what I really liked here is how different it feels compared to Valletta, much more modern, less historic, and a bit more international. I continued towards Tigna Point, where you get some of the best panoramic views of the coastline. Then slowly made my way back towards St Julian's, stopping at Baluta Bay along the way. This area is quieter and more local, with a small beach where you can even take a quick swim and a relaxed square where people just sit and enjoy the evening. To end the day, I had dinner at Barracuda restaurant, a well-known fine dining spot in the area where I paid 100 euros for 2 people, and the food quality was definitely at a high level. After that, I headed back to the hotel to rest, because the next day I was heading to Gozo Island, which turned out to be one of the highlights of my Malta itinerary. On my 4th day in Malta, I headed to the Sirkeva ferry terminal to take the ferry over to Gozo with my car, and one important thing to know is that you don't pay on the way there, the ticket is only charged on the return. I highly recommend coming early in the morning because the queues can get quite long. The ferry ride takes about 20 minutes and you're not allowed to stay in your car. So I went up to the seating areas where you'll find indoor and outdoor spaces, a small cafe, and everything you need for the short trip. As the ferry moves, you also get beautiful views of Comino Island, which is a nice bonus. Once I arrived in Magar, Gozo immediately felt different from Malta, much quieter, greener, and more relaxed. And this is where the island really starts to stand out. I made a quick stop in Victoria, grabbed a takeaway coffee for around 2.50 euros, and then drove towards St Lawrence, one of the most scenic parts of the island. One of the main highlights here is the inland sea, a natural lagoon connected to the open sea through a narrow cave, and I took a small boat tour for 5 euros per person, which lasts around 15 to 20 minutes and is easily one of the best things to do in Gozo. The boat passes through the cave tunnel and suddenly opens up to a dramatic rocky coastline with crystal clear water, and this moment honestly feels like something out of a movie. During the ride, we also saw unique rock formations, including one that looks like a crocodile, and areas where the water turns into a deep, unreal blue. After the boat tour, I explored the area a bit more, passed by small souvenir stalls and local cafes, and then flew my drone to capture the famous Blue Hole, Fungus Rock, and Duejra Bay from above, which is easily one of the most impressive landscapes in Gozo. After taking it all in, I headed back towards Victoria to continue exploring the island. When I arrived in Victoria, the capital of Gozo, I was lucky to find free parking near the center, which made it really easy to start exploring on foot. I walked towards the main squares, passing local markets and small shops, and what I liked most about Victoria is that it feels much more local and less touristy compared to Malta. I made my way to St George's Square, one of the main gathering spots in the city, surrounded by cafes and restaurants, and stopped for lunch at Rosa, where I tried traditional Gozo dishes like rabbit stew and local plates, and the total came to around 30 euros, 35 euros per person. After lunch, I visited St George's Basilica, which has a very impressive interior and is definitely worth a quick stop. From there, I continued walking through the narrow streets until I reached the Citadel, one of the most important landmarks in Gozo, and this is where the real highlight begins. The best part is that it's completely free to enter, and once inside, you can explore the old streets, visit the Cathedral of the Assumption, and most importantly, enjoy panoramic views over the entire island, which are easily some of the best views in Gozo. The whole visit takes around 20 to 30 minutes, but it's absolutely worth it for the views alone. After exploring Victoria, I headed towards Cala for my next adventure, a boat tour around Comino Island. To visit Comino Island, I took a private speedboat tour from Kuala, which cost me 120 euros in total, and honestly, this turned out to be one of the best experiences of my entire Malta itinerary. The boat was fast and comfortable, and the ride itself already felt like an adventure as we cruised through the crystal clear water. Our first stop was a hidden creek, a small secluded spot with unbelievably clear water that felt like a secret paradise. From there, we passed St. Nicolau Bay and continued towards Santa Maria Bay, the only sandy beach on Comino and one of the more relaxed areas on the island. Then, we explored the Santa Maria Caves, a series of impressive sea caves with dramatic rock formations and deep blue water. And this is where things start to get really impressive. As we moved around the island, we also saw natural formations like Elephant Rock and multiple sea arches, and at one point, we even entered a cave with an inland sandy area which felt like a hidden gem. One of my favorite stops was the Crystal Lagoon, where the water turns into an intense turquoise color and is much calmer, making it perfect for swimming. Finally, we arrived at the Blue Lagoon, which is easily one of the most famous places in Malta, and the water really is as blue as you see in photos. But this is also where you'll find the biggest crowds, with thousands of people both in the water and on the rocks. I still went for a swim, and despite the crowds, it was an incredible experience. If you're on a budget, there are also group boat tours that include the caves starting from around 15 euros per adult, or you can simply take a return transport boat to Comino for about 10 euros and stay on the island as long as you want. Overall, I would say taking a private boat like this is one of the best ways to explore Comino, because you get to see hidden spots, avoid some of the crowds, and experience parts of the island that most people never see. After exploring Gozo, I headed back to the ferry terminal for the return trip to Malta, where I paid 4 euros and 65 cents per person and 15 euros and 70 cents for the car, including the driver. Once I arrived, I went straight to the hotel to rest for a bit before heading out again in the evening. Later, I walked around St Julian's, which is also one of the best areas for nightlife in Malta, stopped by Bay Street shopping complex for a bit of shopping, and then went for dinner at Riva restaurant, a well-known spot in the area, where I paid around 80 euros, 90 euros for 2 people. After dinner, I took a relaxed walk through the streets, enjoying the atmosphere one last time, and then headed back to the hotel to rest after a long and full day. On my departure day from Malta, I had a bit of free time in the morning, so I decided to make a short stop in Birgu on the way to the airport, and honestly, it turned out to be one of the most underrated places I visited. I found free parking near St John Bastion and started walking along the marina, which has a calm and authentic atmosphere compared to the more touristy areas. From there, I explored Fort St Angelo, one of the most important historical landmarks in the area, where the entrance costs 10 euros and the views over the harbor are definitely worth it. I then continued through Birgu Gate towards the Malta Maritime Museum, where you can already see interesting exhibits from the outside. Walking through the streets, I visited St. Lawrence's Catholic Church and nearby places like St. Joseph Oratory, which is free to enter, and the Parish Church Museum, where the entrance is around 5 euros or sometimes donation based, all adding to the rich historical character of Birgu. As I reached the central square, I saw the Statue of Victory surrounded by small cafes and local life, which gave the area a very authentic Maltese feel. I also passed by the Inquisitor's Palace and continued exploring the narrow streets filled with traditional houses and colorful balconies, and one of the best parts here is simply walking without a plan and enjoying the quiet atmosphere. Compared to Valletta, Birgu feels much less crowded and more local, and that's exactly what makes it special. After exploring for about 1 to 2 hours, I headed to the airport, returned my rental car, and caught my flight back. In total, I spent 5 days in Malta, and I was able to see most of the must-visit places on the island. Overall, Malta offers a unique mix of history, nature, and beautiful coastal views, and while it's not the cheapest destination in Europe, I would say it's definitely worth it, especially if you plan your itinerary well and manage your budget. For me, renting a car made a huge difference, giving me the freedom to explore everything at my own pace. And after this trip, Malta is definitely a place I would come back to again. Now let's talk about the real question. How much does a trip to Malta actually cost? For 5 days, for 2 people, here's a realistic breakdown based on my experience. The hotel cost me 250 euros per night for a double room with breakfast included, and since I stayed 4 nights, that comes to 1000 euros in total. Car rental was 42 euros per day, so around 210 euros total, plus roughly 70 euros, 80 euros for fuel. For food, including lunches and dinners, I spent around 100 euros to 140 euros per day for 2 people, which comes to roughly 500 euros to 650 euros in total. Activities and entrance fees came to around 300 euros to 400 euros, and for extras like coffee, water, and small daily expenses, you can expect around 150 euros to 200 euros. So in total, for 5 days in Malta for 2 people, you are looking at around 2,300 euros to 2,600 euros. And realistically, around 2,500 euros is a very accurate average depending on your travel style. For me, the biggest highlight was definitely Gozo and Comino, while Valletta and Mdina offered some of the most unique city experiences. And renting a car made a huge difference, giving me the freedom to explore everything at my own pace. Would I come back? Definitely. Would I recommend it? Also, yes. If you found this Malta travel guide helpful, don't forget to like the video and let me know in the comments. Do you think Malta is worth it? And if you want more honest travel guides and real travel experiences, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next journey.